This is a presentation of Michigan State University's Knight Center for Environmental Journalism.
It's a human-driven disaster. People messed up and brought this beetle in and released it, and it's going to be a long time before we have anything, even if we were to find resistant species or resistant individuals, you can't replace tens of millions, hundreds of millions of ash trees. The ash trees in North America have never really been exposed to an insect like this before, and they've never had any reason to evolve any sort of defenses for an insect like this. And so they tend to be much less resistant and much more vulnerable. We've tried to estimate how many trees have died, and our estimates are based on the inventory of ash trees. We have data from forest ash trees and from city ash trees, and we know a sizable proportion of those have died in southeast Michigan, for example. And our best guess is somewhere around 40 million ash trees in lower Michigan have died. That could be closer to 50 million. Nationwide, it's certainly something above and beyond 60 million trees. The emerald ash borer has become the most destructive forest insect to ever invade North America, both in terms of the numbers of trees that have died and in terms of the economic impacts to private landowners, communities, public lands, you name it. It seems anywhere there's ash trees, it's having an effect. It actually came into the Detroit area first. It probably came in with solid wood packing material, things like pallets and crates that are used on container ships. We know that it was here by at least the early 1990s, and it took until 2002 before the populations built up and people started to pay attention and we actually got it identified. There are certainly natural enemies of emerald ash borer in China, but I think by and large it has to do with this interaction between the trees and the insect and just the stronger resistance that you find in China. And the economists, they looked at the impact in terms of dollars for municipalities and private landowners that have ash landscape trees, ash shade trees. And the net result was that over the next 10 years, a very conservative estimate of the economic impacts of ash borer, if you add the suburbs and bedroom communities, then the number of ash trees doubles and you're up into a $20 billion economic cost just over the next 10 years, just for landscape trees.
So teams of researchers from this country were sent to China. First, they had to locate a viable population of EAB there. Once that happened, they collected the EAB life stages and they examined them, essentially, for anything that would appear out of the ordinary. So an external parasite would be a larva living on the larva of the EAB, for example. Once they had a sample of those, they attempted to rear them in larger quantities so that they could be studied for that environmental assessment, for example. And then only after all those steps were completed did we build this facility and begin to mass rear them. So what we do here is we collect emerald ash borers in various stages of their development. We bring them to the lab, and then we use them to grow a large number of our parasitic wasps. These parasitic wasps are small insects, about 1 centimeter long at the most. They do not sting humans. They use their reproductive organ like a stinger to lay an egg into or on an emerald ash borer, either an egg or a larva. Once they do that here in the lab, we allow them to go through their life cycle. And once we have a sufficient quantity of them at the right time of year, we ship them to our state cooperators, and they are released into the field against natural populations of EAB. There are 3 different kinds of wasps because each attacks either a different stage of EAB or at a different time of year. So for example, Oobius attacks the egg stage of EAB. These are a solitary parasite, so they kill one egg. Each time that female wasp lays one of her eggs, it kills one emerald ash borer egg. She can parasitize multiple EAB eggs in her life, and that would prevent a larva from ever entering the tree. For those that escape that first level of parasitism, they would then become a larva and begin to grow. Tetrasticus will begin to parasitize EAB in its 3rd growth stage, or instar. We refer to it as an instar. At that point, the larva is half grown and is still continuing to feed on the tree. The prepupal phase of the EAB, as it begins to dig into the wood, can be attacked by both Tetrasticus and also by Spathius. And because of these 3 levels of kind of protection, if you will, we hope to effect a more complete control of EAB than any one of those 3 species could offer us alone. Before we were allowed to release them anywhere, we had to go through an environmental assessment. And what that is we basically look at the potential effect that the release of these wasps would have on our natural environment here in North America. So we look at, most importantly, what the effect of the wasp would be on native relatives, cousins of EAB, and to see whether or not the wasps will attack them also. That step has been completed, and there was a finding of no significant impact. And that means we have determined that the release of these insects does not have a significant chance of having a negative impact on our environment. This year we have released over 5,000 Oobius thus far. We are on track to produce probably close to 100,000 Tetrasticus and about 50,000 Spathius. And next year we would like to see production grow even more than that. Basically all of the Great Lakes states will receive parasitoids in the very near future if they have not already. We have already completed releases in Minnesota, Michigan, Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, and we have on the list for next year probably also Tennessee, Pennsylvania, New York, and Wisconsin. What we hope to see here is some measure of control against EAB where we could either slow down or prevent tree mortality. We will better know the answer to that question in the years ahead as we are able to produce and release more of these wasps to more areas around the country that are infested with EAB and look to see if there are positive effects on the trees.